Welcome to the What If podcast with your hosts, Spencer Worth Davis and Ryan Copperoon.
It's the What If podcast. My name is Ryan Copperoon.
What's happening, Ryan?
Who are you?
My name is Spencer.
Hi, Spencer.
Hi, I'm Eric over
Hi,
here.
bud.
Hi,
Hey,
over
guys.
there.
My name's Eric.
How are you, Mason?
Feeling good.
Feeling good. Feeling great.
Yeah.
How are you?
Tomorrow's my birthday. My real
Shit.
birthday.
Because
My Saturn is returning
so
tomorrow.
are we just like replaying last Friday?
Yeah,
tomorrow?
I think so.
Okay.
I wish I was going to be here, man.
Where are you going?
I'm leaving for Portland tomorrow morning.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So I will not be able to be there.
I got
Are you?
I gotta
You're not
watch
driving
out.
out there, are you?
Hell no.
Okay,
No.
that'd be kind of tight, actually.
I mean, really?
parts of it would be, yeah.
Yeah, driving.
A lot of it would suck, but parts of it would be pretty dope.
Driving through North Dakota, it would not.
You just got to go through South Dakota.
Yeah.
Even that is
Nah,
not.
South Dakota's a great
Have you done
drive.
it?
Yeah, the Badlands are cool for like a couple hours, and then you realize you have like 9 more to go before you get
I
out
think
of that
all
state.
the Black Hills,
You gotta do that to get anywhere
Devil's
out of the.
Tower.
If you're leaving the
Badlands.
Midwest, you have to go 9 hours of boring shit, though.
Mhm.
In
Yeah.
any direction.
I
really.
think that drive is
Yeah.
pretty fun up until you clear the Rockies, and then it's mind numbing after that.
like the southwest of the United States.
Yeah, like everything between Colorado and the West Coast is just.
Yeah, Nevada. I remember doing
mind-numbing.
Nevada and being like, "Woof." No wonder they built Vegas in the middle of the state because this is just dog shit all around it.
And Area 51.
Yes, they're like, no one's ever gonna go there. Speaking of Area 51, we got.
Welcome back. Please don't sue us for copyright infringement.
That's as much as we can play of it before it actually becomes an issue.
Our question today.
Our question today is, what if it really happens?
Okay.
Mason, do you
Okay.
want to tell the story? Okay.
Okay.
Sure, yeah.
Do you want to tell the story behind that, where this originally came from? Do you
So-
even remember what we were talking about when this originally came up?
I vaguely do. I remember talking about how we were moving into a new house, and there was some kind of conversation that started about spaces that are haunted and people having paranormal experiences and encounters with spirits.
Was this a concern in the house you're moving into?
It isn't, but we were just sort of bullshitting about what the space was like.
Yeah,
And, one of our friends brought up that a place she used to live, the people who lived there before her talked about how they kept having this experience in their stairwell, that they would be walking up the stairs and they would feel a pressure against their chest, and something would push them against the wall and constrict their movement.
Like physically move them?
That's what Evie said that this person said.
Okay.
Like multiple times.
Which
this
is always
happened.
So this is the
always
third,
how it is,
right? The third-hand account of.
But according to Evie, this person talked to her landlord about it and mentioned that there was a presence, and the landlord said, "Oh yeah, in the stairwell." It was like the corroborating of the story thing. Anyway, so we kind of started talking about my problem with stories like this, other than the fact that they are almost never coming from the person who actually experienced it.
Sure.
Is that they always seem it's always sort of dropped casually whenever this topic comes up. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, one time I saw a completely earth-shattering, mind-altering thing. And I'm aware that there are some people who do consider ghosts and encounters with ghosts as part of their everyday reality, so it maybe isn't as big of a deal to them. But my issue is that if it really happened to me, there's no way I would be able to continue living my life the way that I have.
Yeah.
It would completely shift my perception of who I am, or what reality is, what existence is, where we're going, what's worthy of spending your time on. Just all these notions of reality as I understand it would be completely turned on their head. And I think the thing that I was like, I would never pay my taxes again. I would never go back to my job.
It would be really hard to get up tomorrow and just be like, guess I got to go to work, and then like do this bullshit after work, and then like
and the fact
mow my yard when I get home.
The fact that these
like,
people can be so casual when they're talking about it, and maybe it's just a difference in mindset. Like I am a person who doesn't. I don't refuse to believe in these things, but I do not accept them as an axiom of my existence.
Yeah.
So if it really happened to me in a way where I was clear-headed, I was sober, It was daytime. I wasn't sleeping, and I really had that experience. I don't think I would be able to continue living my life the way that I do now.
We're gonna figure out how you think and how you feel as it relates to a few different versions of this. So we are gonna talk about ghosts today. I have a super fun. Well, I don't know if fun's the right word. It's actually not fun. It's kind of scary.
We also made it really dark and spooky in this room.
Did. Okay,
we were recording by the light of one candle and one Himalayan salt lamp right now.
And it's like, and the funny part is it's like 7:11 p.m. on a Thursday, so it's not even like really spooky scary.
But we got the shades drawn. It's like a little bit dark in here. I might turn the monitor off. We'll get real.
We'll see how dark we can make it in here and how much we can freak out.
I'll grab my Ouija board.
Yeah. But we are going to do it related to 3 separate things. We're going to do we're going to tell a ghost story. I'm going to tell a ghost story that I'm pretty excited to tell you all about. We're going to also explore time slips, which is sort of a new one for me, but
really?
Mr. Davis has some more information about time slips.
You were not familiar with that concept before?
I mean, I watched The Matrix. So you know,
what does the Matrix have to do with that?
I've seen Land Before Time.
Well, here's this totally irrelevant fact.
No, not at all.
I enjoy pepperoni pizzas. So yes,
I do. No. There's the scene on the stairs where the cat walks by twice, and they call that a glitch in the Matrix. But that's also a version of a time slip, for something to happen in short order.
That's like the lady at Goodwill version of time slips, though.
Dude, if you tell that story, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna leave the room, and when it's done, I'll come back. I can be like, "Are you done yet? I'm out here." Until that story's over. And then we got a third topic for today,
which I think we're opening with, correct?
I think we are. I think we're going to open with UFO abductions.
Well, alien abductions.
Okay, alien abductions.
You can't get abducted by weather balloons.
I even paused to set you up to hit the button I knew you wanted to hit when I said UFO abductions.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
See, he still didn't hit the right button.
I think I did.
Still didn't hit the right
button. All right, so probably one of the best known abduction cases, and what? What do you have to say about my story before I even start my story?
I just feel like we should go back and be like, we didn't connect the 3 things we just said to being like, hey, we're going to talk about all these in the framework of what if they really happened? What if they happened to you? Yeah. Okay. What if they really happened?
Well, that's what we're doing.
In respect to the question is interesting that it's what if it happened, not did it happen?
Yeah.
Not does it happen, but what if it happened?
Yeah, I think these are all very good and interesting cases of these things being potentially very real. And I think we're less debating the merit of whether or not these things actually happened, but we're just going to take them at face value and say they did.
Yes.
Then what?
Yes.
Sure. Then what is your life like now? Or what would you think their lives would or could be like after that incident actually happening?
Okay.
All right.
So we're starting.
So we're taking this story as absolute fact, assuming that every part of it is true, and then just what would we do from that point?
Game on.
Okay. So this is the story of Whitley Strieber.
What a name
that is! I was
Whitley Strieber.
Wow,
Strieber.
Oh, Strieber.
Whitley Strieber, and, like a boss.
If you guys would like to see the cover of his book to be sufficiently freaked out before we start this, yeah, Whitley.
It's dark as shit in here. I can't see the cover of that book at all.
It looks like an alien.
Here you go. We'll pass it around.
It does look like an alien.
We'll pass it around. It is indeed an alien.
Oh god.
Whitley Strieber wrote a book in 1987 called Communion that documents his experiences being abducted by aliens.
And if you had any questions about whether or not this really happened, Whitley's made it very clear for you by saying a true story by Whitley Strieber.
Okay,
so well, that's on the cover of the book.
So real quick though, there's actually a reason for that.
Okay.
Whitley Strieber was an author before. This was not his first book. He had written 5 or 6 books prior that were all fiction.
Oh, so he's like, just so you know.
This was a fiction author writing his first, in air quotes, nonfiction book.
Is that the same thing as L. Ron Hubbard writing a bunch of science fiction for years and then being like, now I know God and also...
I guess, I don't know. I'm again, we're going to assume that Whitley's telling the truth. Yeah.
A true story by Whitley. Let's hear it.
So the book came out in 1987. It's mostly about events that happened at the end of 1985.
Okay.
Whitley owned a cabin in upstate New York.
Okay.
And he and his family would... I'm just going to get all these burps out of the way and then start my story again.
Nope.
Anal probe. I've been wanting to say that for like 3 minutes. Just start talking about it.
No, see, now we have to keep all this.
Anal probe.
Too bad.
Who's had it? Who has been probed?
Raise your hand.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Okay.
So Whitley had this cabin in upstate New York, and he would go up there with his family. He'd go up there when he was writing a new book.
Mm-hmm.
He normally lived in New York City.
Proper.
And on December 26th of 1985, he had the following experience. He was asleep in his room. This is the day after Christmas.
In upstate New York.
Yep.
At his cabin.
Yep.
Okay.
He's asleep.
And Santa came back. Said, "You're coming with me."
Came back with a vengeance.
He wakes up in the middle of the night and hears this noise coming from... So the bedroom is on the upper floor of the house.
Mm-hmm.
He hears this noise coming from the lower floor. And he describes it as like this whooshing sound of like air moving through. He said it sounded like there were a bunch of people like running around the downstairs of his house.
I'm sorry, just really quickly. Did you say this? Is he the only one in the house? Is he by himself?
His wife is also there.
Okay.
Yep. It's the two of them.
Okay. So his wife is running laps in the kitchen, like on
his wife. They're in bed together.
Okay.
Ooh.
Were they doing it?
Whitney.
Yeah.
So he hears these sounds coming from downstairs, gets up to see what's going on. There doesn't appear to be anything going on downstairs, and goes back to bed. And then after going back to bed, sees this 3-foot tall person enter his bedroom. And
As in looks like a person just like walking in the door?
he basically describes your like stereotypical gray alien. So
Little green man.
3 to 4 feet tall, gray skin, big eyes, small mouth, big head, that sort of thing. And he sees this person or alien or what he calls them visitors throughout the book. And it's like standing in the doorway and it sees him and like runs downstairs.
Okay.
At which point he gets up, grabs his shotgun,
No doubt.
and chases this thing outside.
Welcome to Earth.
Punched in the nose.
Gray aliens don't have noses, Ryan.
They have nostrils.
You clearly did not do your research
They
for
have
this
nostrils.
episode. He chases this thing outside, or goes outside, assuming it went outside. Doesn't see it outside, so now he's just standing out there with his gun. He then blacks out after stepping outside, and the next thing he remembers is being in the woods, what he guesses is like a few hundred yards from this cabin. And he's laying on the ground, and now he's surrounded by like a bunch of these little things. These aliens, visitors, people, whatever.
In the woods.
Yep. He then blacks out again and wakes up while being like moved through the air, through these trees, up onto a spaceship.
Okay, Whitley.
Yep. So Whitley is now aboard a spaceship,
Nice.
surrounded by even more of these things.
Nice.
He's on it's the, again, sort of the typical abduction story. He's on some sort of like medical operating table. He's strapped down. He can't move. And they want to do a bunch of different experiments on him. They like prick his finger at one point, and they're communicating with him. But he said it's not telepathic. They're like, he can actually hear them speaking to him.
Do the aliens
in
speak
English, I'm assuming. Well,
Okay.
or they've got some sort of universal translator situation going on.
I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
They're smart. If they're here, they're smart.
Right.
Mhm.
So after the finger pricking, hey, we're taking Whitley's story seriously.
Hey, I'm
all right?
not.
I'm
None
not
of your
if
snickering.
they're here, they're smart. Comment.
That's a very strong point.
I mean, I'm just saying.
You don't travel intergalactically if you're dumb.
That's always been my. Well, we'll talk about that in a sec. Keep going.
So he's on this operating table. He describes it as like a operating theater. Like there are people around him who are like the
turn of the century kind of surgical
So
advancement.
there are people around him who are like the medical aliens, but then there are also other aliens just like observing.
Tight.
And eventually one alien approaches with this little like metallic box that somehow it's conveyed to him that this thing is going in his brain. And he doesn't really have a choice about it.
You said a B word there.
I'm glad
I
you said brain.
Super did not expect.
I'm glad that word was brain.
What did you?
In your butt. In your butt.
Hey,
was 100%, 100% where I thought this story was going.
Hey, but this thing's
Mason-
going right up your brain.
It's not. It's not even.
Holy freaking shit, buddy.
It's not even just because Mason said anal probe earlier. I was like, oh, this is definitely going in his butt.
My dumbass, when you said a B word, I was like, box?
No,
You said box.
You already said box. I was like, this. You
I
got
didn't know
a
what
metal,
part of the conversation you were referring to.
This dude got a metal box shoved in his butt, man. I was
Nope.
no. Okay,
Right in the brain piece.
so it's going in his brain.
Yep.
Okay,
They go ahead and shove it right up his brain.
right up his brain.
And he wakes up the next morning in his bed.
Okay,
He then spends the next like many months trying to figure out what happened.
and what's in his fucking head?
Yep. He goes the whole like hypnotic regression route, which I don't know if either of you guys are familiar with that, but it's basically,
K-Pax.
huh?
K-Pax.
Did they do that? And that's the Kevin Spacey movie, right?
That's where he-
I
Isn't
know
he an angel?
I know I
He's an
saw that
alien.
at one point, but I don't
He's an
really remember
alien?
what the
He's an
plot
alien
was.
from K-Pax who gets locked up in a psych ward or an assisted living home for thinking that he's an alien. But the idea is that he really is. But they try to get him through all this regression therapy to get him to
Whoa,
admit
that's
that really
crazy.
he was
I don't
like
remember that at all. I haven't seen that movie in forever.
he's actually supposed to be like a murderer whose psyche is protecting himself from the idea. But it's not really clear.
But he's for real an alien, maybe.
It's not really clear.
Okay.
Whoa,
So
that's fucked up. I did not know that was the plot of that movie. That's fucking crazy. I don't remember that
go
at all.
rent K-Pax from your local Mr. Movies.
I just might. I'm
It's
a big
bad.
Kevin Spacey fan.
It's bad good.
Is it bad?
It's bad good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
So he goes that route, a hypnotic regression route of working with a hypnotherapist to hypnotize him and then try and bring him back to these moments to try and recall more information about what happened. And he ends up coming to the conclusion that he's actually been abducted throughout his life. This was not the first time it had happened. And that other members of his family, including his wife and his son, had also been abducted.
Did he come to that conclusion or did they come to that conclusion?
That's a good question.
Okay.
He believes they were. I guess I'm not sure, since the book is written from his point of view, if they reciprocate that or not.
Got it. He just had a feeling. You look, you know what? You
Well,
look really abducted
No,
recently.
like he recalled events in which they had been either taken as a group or having seen his wife or his son.
It's like, yeah, remember that other time when the fucking garage door was open?
Yeah.
Abduction.
Abduction.
That's what
Or
that
like,
was.
Yeah.
I was getting brain probed and I looked over and my wife was next to me. You know, that kind of thing.
Okay. All right.
So that's the very quick version of a 350-page book. But
yeah.
Before we dive into what it would be like, can I just get my skepticism out of the way?
No.
real
Yeah,
quick?
no, let's do that. No, let's
'Cause
do that because we're going to have
I do-
skepticism about all these. So I think
I
we
do
need
want
to
to say that my prevailing skepticism about stories like this is that this story ends with I woke up, right?
it
And-
starts
sorry.
and ends with you sleeping in your bed.
Right. That's the main thing about stories like this that kind of raise a flag for me.
So
You woke up in the middle of the night, you had this crazy experience, and then you woke up in the morning.
I 100% agree with you, except for the fact that I've had a lot of fucked up dreams in my lifetime. Like I've had some fucked up dreams where you wake up and you're like, what the fuck? That was so fucked up. I can't believe that like X, Y, and Z happened, or I was fucking like I was Wolverine and I was like stabbing somebody to death, but I was in like a pool of Jello, but it wasn't really Jello. It was like seaweed, but like it wasn't seaweed either. It was
that
like,
is a very dream-like dream.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, but
more realistic dreams are harder to.
But have you ever have you ever woken up from a realistic dream and more than a couple hours after it happening, being like, oh fuck, I'm really glad that was a dream. Like it was a dream.
But I will say that I've had times where I'm in my bed and I'm experiencing something where my eyes are open. I'm like looking around the room. People are talking, and usually it's not paranormal. Normally it's like I'm having a crazy conversation with a roommate or something, and something really awful gets said, and then like the dream gets interrupted by like my cat jumping on the bed. And I'll wake up and realize that I was dreaming.
But you were physically in your bed, in your room,
right?
Having that.
Like if the dream hadn't been interrupted, that I may have thought that something like that actually transpired.
So I have moments somewhat regularly, like when I'm awake, where I have to stop and think about like, did that thing actually happen, or did I dream that thing happened?
Mm-hmm.
Woof.
Which I think is, I don't think I had that issue before. Issue, whatever you want to call it. That didn't happen to me before I started fucking around with lucid dreaming.
Okay.
Which I think to some extent like breaks down that wall of
sure.
Yeah, if you're doing it intentionally, for sure it does.
And it also like improves your recall of your dreams, so you remember more specific details. You're used to like documenting what happened in your dreams,
which makes them feel realer because there's more detail and you're documenting them.
And in your dream, you're used to like checking whether or not you're dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
So throughout, like, if you're lucid dreaming, the first step is realizing like, oh, I'm dreaming.
Right.
And so,
because that's how you function inside of it, right?
In the dream, you have to check like, am I awake or not right now? And so I'll find myself like doing that throughout the day. Sometimes when I definitely am awake, like one of the things you can do is like look at a clock,
look at your hands,
and then look away and then look back. And in a dream, that clock will almost never be the same time.
Right.
Or like, looking at yourself is usually a good way to be like, oh, half of me is not there. Or I look crazy or whatever. And so I'll do those things during the day sometime when I'm actually awake.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I'd and be like, oh yeah, okay, it's still 11:15, I'm awake. But like I have had moments where specific events I've had to stop and like sort of mentally check if things actually happen or not. In this case, there should have been, if he got up, grabbed his gun and ran outside, there should have been like evidence of that, I would think.
Right. Yeah, that gun is outside.
If you had a thing in your brain.
Well,
right.
So that's always the hard part, which is like...
But people have pulled like weird bits of metal out of themselves or had doctors pull out like alien implants, again, in quotes, that, have been tested and have been like, we don't know. It's a piece of metal and it has weird like radio properties. Like it's
Have they really?
Yeah.
Is that a real thing that's like actually been proven?
Yes.
Okay.
With a question mark. But like if you wake up and chase something outside and grabbed your gun and moved it and like, threw on your boots to go outside or whatever, like you would think there would be some...
That also, just because you did something physically doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't.
No, for sure.
That you were.
I think we're getting away from the point of this, though. Which
we are, even though I do think this. I think this part is okay. Just really quickly, you're absolutely right. I think it's important though to have these conversations because it's important to have healthy skepticism about this stuff, while also acknowledging that this is one instance of this, and there are lots of instances of this that exist in the world. There are tons of people who are like, I have a story that is similar to this story. It feels unquestionably real, like, and that was kind of the point I was trying to make about the dream stuff. Like, I know you guys are saying like, yeah, you've had dreams where they feel very real or whatever, but it seems like the people who tell these stories are like, I know what a dream is, and I know what I woke up and this was like fucking happening to me, and then I woke up.
Too hard, bro.
Yeah, exactly. But really though,
but
you know what I mean, though? Like,
the brain has an incredible capacity at self-deception. I mean, there are people who there are amputees who believe that they still have arms.
So, well, that's a nerve thing, though. That's
I mean, psychologically, who have built up a barrier to refuse to admit that they have lost a limb. I mean,
whoa, that's crazy.
There are people who believe that they are blind, whose eyes are functioning perfectly. I mean, the brain has an incredible capacity at deceiving yourself.
So, okay, to tie this back, I think my first reaction, if I'd experienced what Whitley Strieber describes experiencing, would be a conversation like this in my own head.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Of like, okay,
Yeah.
most logical explanation. Yeah, I went to bed last night.
Mhm.
I woke up in the same place. I think a lot of weird stuff happened in the meantime, but like that doesn't really seem possible.
Right.
Mhm.
It's implausible that what I am imagining happened actually happened.
I think
Mhm.
what I would do if that happened to me, A, sell that cabin. I'm never going back there again.
Are
B,
you okay? Well, go ahead.
B,
Well, actually, no. I want to stop on A because
waking up in the middle of the night to a 3-foot extraterrestrial standing at the foot of my bed in the middle of the fucking woods, I'm never living that down. That's the most terrifying thing that could possibly happen to me.
is there any part of you that wants it to happen again?
Just out of like curiosity or
Well, yeah, like I guess a small part of me, like, even though, and we'll get into the ghost stuff later.
It's like a Stockholm thing.
Well, I mean, maybe, but also maybe like, I guess my brain goes, if this is real, if this happened to me, if an alien actually walked into my bedroom, is there any part of my like curiosity as a human being and my personality that goes like, where does this road go? You know, like,
okay,
like
so
instead
I don't
instead
think
of running from it and being not necessarily, I'm not judging that mentality.
please,
It makes sense to me too to be like, fuck, that's fucked up and weird, and I'm terrified.
That's a
quick poll.
technologically advanced alien civilization that is invading your bedroom.
In my house.
Can I take a quick poll?
Yeah, let's do it.
If you had the option tonight of being abducted by aliens,
Hell
yes
no.
or no?
No way.
Okay, there's one no.
No way.
Do I have any control over like what? Like,
Oh yeah, what kind of alien? Are these like the fun cantina aliens?
Do you have the amount of information I just gave
Or
you?
are these like the Dreamcatcher Sigourney Weaver aliens?
You don't know.
Yeah, no.
no, absolutely not.
I mean, it's like, hey,
Because I'm going for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you really going
Just
for
think
it though?
about
I
the-
know.
Okay, hold on. If I know that it's like a legitimate thing,
Well, then why do you need to be abducted? If you
you
already
don't-
know it's legitimate.
okay, if you knew there were aliens on this planet, you wouldn't want to meet them.
I would like to meet them. I don't want to be abducted by anybody.
Yeah, meeting them
Against my will.
meeting
Doing
them
it.
and inadvertently being pulled into a spaceship to have tests run on me in a way that like could be entirely like dangerous
That
and
they somehow
stressful and
feel like they need
intensive
to
and like
subvert.
whatever. Yeah, like that's a different
if they're
thing.
sneaking around stealing people, that's malicious. If they want to just come out in the
I
open,
don't disagree.
you know. I mean, I guess
I don't know that it's malicious.
Oh, for sure it is.
it is. If you're taking someone against their will to perform tests on them, or for whatever reason, if you take someone out of their bed,
Watch out, little bitch.
Gotcha, bitch.
for without the permission, that's a foul thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it's a foul thing to do. I don't know that.
I don't disagree with that. I still think I would do it.
But
I mean, it's
okay,
a,
you're
it's
going
a hell
for
of
it.
a thing to experience.
And I guess I'm not going for it either. Okay, so just to rewind really quickly, I guess what I'm trying to say, and I didn't mean to cut off your
No,
ABC because
it's
I know
cool.
you had some thoughts, but I guess like my brain gets stuck in that moment of if I were faced with something as, again, like kind of fucking life changing, if it really happened, if this was a real thing, am I going to be like, I'm trying to get as far a fuck away from this as humanly possible? Or am I trying to be like, okay, maybe this is something I need to not only digest, but like, do I participate or do I try to, do I try to write a, hey, thanks for coming. Can we do this differently next time instead of you walking into my bedroom at 2 a.m? Like, is there,
yeah, apparently they
like,
understand English, so you could just write them right better.
Dear
I think-
aliens, thanks
I think-
for coming.
I guess it would depend on
at one
on-
point in Strieber's story, he told them that he was nervous, and they're like, "Oh, well, what can we do to make you less nervous?" And he asked,
Take me home.
he asked to smell one of them,
What?
and they said, "Okay."
This sounds like yeah.
Yep.
All right.
What?
Well, I
So
think
that's what he would do in that situation,
right. He would
Wouldn't be
just-
my move,
Let me
but-
just smell you.
Can I sniff
He
you real
said,
quick?
he said that his hand smelled like cardboard.
I think a big part of it, as far as
It's in the book.
whether or not
That's weird.
whether or not you want to try to recreate this, I think that would have to do with time and how empirical you can sort of confirm or deny. Like I think my first reaction, other than like maybe not like sell the cabin, but I'm going away from.
Yeah.
I'm going away from this place. I don't want to spend another night here if this just happened to me last night. The first thing I would do would go to a hospital and get a x-ray. Take a CAT scan of my brain. If there's a metal box in there, let me know.
Also, maybe check my butt while you're at it.
Yeah, just check my body in general. If you can find an object, it's obviously going to be of extraterrestrial origin. I stand to be the most famous person in the world now.
Like immediately.
If you can prove, this is why you say people have. Anyway, skepticism aside, that's what I would do. I would say,
or maybe you skip those steps, write a book about it, and sell 2 million copies of that book.
I certainly wouldn't go to regression therapy first.
See,
because it seems like
that's the thing that always gets me. Like you go to a guy whose whole job is to
hypnotize you,
hypnotize people, and then tell them about when they were abducted by aliens.
Right.
Like none of that is legitimate information.
You come into the room.
Not even a little bit.
You come into the room saying, I've been abducted. There are parts of my brain, parts of my memories that have been erased or I blacked out. That's a ton of information for that person to work with.
Please,
to
crazy
create.
hypnotic regression UFO alien abduction guy, fill those blank spaces in for me.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. See, and that's
a much
the thing,
more promising result would be if you remember having something put in your brain, go get a CAT scan. Go get an X-ray. If you find something, you're about to change the face of science or be abducted by the government and silenced.
Yeah, there's
but if someone like this really had this experience and they can write a book about it without being silenced by the government, something tells me either the government's not too worried about this Whitley, spilling the beans about little green men, or that they don't have any knowledge of this because it didn't really happen.
Yeah.
Just before we wrap this up, if you're listening to this, if you've had an experience, if an encounter with...
What's that phone number?
612-246-4614. Oh, please, God.
Let us know, because I think it's interesting to think about, there's a whole consort of Canadian astronauts and fighter pilots who have formed a congressional subcommittee on I forget what they call it, disclosure of alien disclosure, that they are convinced that I have seen.
You talking about Stephen Greer?
Is he one of the pilots?
No. Because he falls into the fucking out of his mind category.
That's not it. No. That's not it though. I know what Mason's talking about right now.
But there are people who have been up in the outer atmosphere. People who have just been pilots of experimental aircraft.
There's a couple pilots.
There are a lot of astronauts.
There's a couple of fighter pilots from Iran who have had...
That's a great story. We should tell that one at some point.
That one is a good one. Like, there's a couple of dudes like that who have these experiences. It's broad daylight. Yeah. Granted, they are doing something amazing, and you probably see a lot of shit you can't explain. But anyway, yeah, if you've had an experience, let us know, because I would love to hear. I would love to hear a single firsthand account. I agree with you because I've never had that. hi@whatifpodcast.com. If you want to give us a call and leave a message, 612-246-4614. We will 1,000% redo this episode and have you on the podcast. And we will probably grill you, but we will absolutely grill you out of love because we love this shit. And we're psyched to know your experience of it really fucking happening. We'll be back.
Hell yeah!
Hell yeah! We're gonna talk about ghost stories under candlelight in the dark when we come back with the What If podcast.
We want to hear from you. Send us a message. Email hi, that's hi, @whatifpodcast.com. Or leave us a voicemail at 612-246-4614. And now, back to the What If podcast.
Hey, it's the What If podcast. We're back in action today. We're talking about what if it really happened?
What's happening?
What happens? We just came off talking about UFO abductions while probably kind of constantly questioning the idea of what if that thing really did happen for our good friend Whitley, Strieber.
Whitley went on to write a bunch of other books, mostly about paranormal things, and now actually does a paranormal podcast, by the way.
Ooh. What is it? Let's
called
shout it
Dreamland.
out. Dreamland.
Started by Art Bell, passed off to Whitley Strieber.
Oh,
Cool.
really?
Yeah.
That's interesting that he gave it to him. Now I got something new to listen to.
There it is.
But don't go listen to that
So
right
he's
now.
he's like a pro paranormal orator.
Oh yeah, he went fully down. He fully embraced the like UFO, all things paranormal life pass.
He put the pro in anal probe.
God damn it. You hit it. You
I've been
nailed it.
sitting on that one for a while.
Oh, no.
Mason shows up and we're just ass deep in puns.
I can't even.
Jesus.
I can't with this.
He is gonna friggin' goose it, boys.
He's not gonna friggin' goose it. He already
All right,
goosed it.
what's your ghost story?
I got a ghost story,
What's your
guys.
goose story?
By the
I'm
light,
excited to hear this because I intentionally did not Google any of this before.
I don't think it's
Is
gonna
this your ghost story?
No, I don't have one personally. I kind of, well, I don't
If
know.
you do email us though, hi@whatifpodcast.com.
That's the one. I was about to say I wish I did, but then I was kind of thinking about what you just said about like in the previous segment about like
Things going up your butt.
not about that. I don't think ghosts put things in people's butts.
Well.
Well, that's true. I don't know that. I guess I'm sure someone has a version of that. But no, but the whole thing about like if that happened to you, if you would change course, if you would sell your fucking house, if you would whatever, like, so part of me is like, I kind of wish I had a ghost story, but I also kind of don't because I don't know if I like want to be there. But the story that I have comes to you from Japan. And I've never been.
Definitely not real. I'm calling bullshit.
Okay. I get it.
No stories from Japan.
This article, well, there's many articles about this, but it came out at the top of 2016, so the year that we are currently in for those listening. And
Thank you for letting our listeners know what year it is.
well, I just wanted to make
Are you
sure
gonna-
everyone's
They
on the
might
same
be
page.
listening from 2030.
See, you never know.
It's like, hey,
True.
let's listen to a podcast before the aliens showed up. See
If
what
we get
people
as
thought about
popular
aliens.
as we dream of, people will be listening to this in 2024.
Whoa.
This is the worst interview I've ever done.
Who are we asking questions? No one's getting asked questions of yet.
Can you tell your ghost story for Christ's sake?
There is a student and I'm sorry, this is in Japan. I'm going to mispronounce a bunch of things throughout the course of this, but I'm going to do my very best. I really promise. There is a student at Tohoku Gakuen University in Japan.
Sounds like a place.
Her name is Yuka Kudo.
Okay.
And Yuka was a sociology major in Japan at said university. I won't try it again. And part of Yuka's graduation thesis was studying the sociological after effects of the tsunamis that happened in March of 2011. It's known as the Tohoku. I don't know what the tilde over the O is, but Tohoku earthquake that resulted in the tsunami that killed, I think it's almost 20,000 people-ish in Japan in 2011. So her graduation thesis is, I kind of want to know from kind of a broad perspective of, families and professions and lifestyles, how did this impact people? What was this happened and then what kind of thing? And an interesting pattern appeared during the course of her interviewing tons of people from tons of different professions and lifestyles and places around the area that was primarily affected by the tsunami. And the pattern that appeared was one of the professions that she sought out like deeper information of was taxi drivers in the area, just to say, hey, what has driving a taxi looked like and been like, and how has it changed since? What Yuka found over the course of these interviews was a lot of these taxi drivers were sort of like, whatever, this is stupid, I don't understand. But 7 independent taxi drivers told her some version of a story in which someone got into their cab and essentially was not there by the time they got to their destination. And one of the more specific versions of this was one driver told a story about a woman who he picked up near Ishinomaki Station, and she asked him to take her to the Minamihama district, which was sort of closer to the ocean, closer again, like to where like the area
would have been most affected by the tsunami.
Exactly. That's actually why what he said to her was, he said that the quote in this version of the story, this article, and we'll post some links to these articles in the show notes, but the version in this article, he said to her, that area is almost empty. Is that okay? He was basically saying like this area has been savaged by a tsunami. Like why?
Right,
kind of like why would you want to take a cab to this area?
There's not going to be much there for you.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently he heard from his back seat, he heard the woman respond to him, "Wait, have I died?" And he turned around and looked into the back seat, and there was no longer a person in the back seat of his cab. And he, again, like in this interview, sort of swears by the fact that this was a real thing that happened to him. And there are, again, out of the 100 interviews that she did with cab drivers in this district, there were 7 who they were not done in groups at all. There were people who committed different versions of this story to her that essentially consisted of someone getting in their cab. Then there's one guy who actually legitimately pulled up he was like, yeah, no, this happened to me. And he pulled up his clipboard of here are my whatever, and like went to the day, and he was like, yeah. And he was like, there's a version, or there's a night where I had a couple different fares in the same night who I hit my clock to start the clock running, and by the time I got to wherever I was going, there wasn't anyone in my back seat anymore. He was like, I have unpaid taxi clocks or whatever, ticker timer, fares, whatever you want to call it. Whatever. I have unpaid fares that are because by the time I showed up to the destination that I was asked to take someone to, there was no longer anyone in my cab.
What sort of questions was she asking of these taxi drivers to get these stories?
Basically, the idea was, and I don't have like the actual questions in front of me, but apparently the sort of the purpose of the research was sort of to say like, did you notice, did things change? Was there anything notable? Okay. Because she was looking for sort of
tsunami,
pre-tsunami,
like what was
post-tsunami,
different? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And apparently a lot of people were like, fuck you, or like, yeah, a lot of things changed. I had less people because a lot of people died. Like people were kind of almost like offended by the fact that she was like asking what changed. Of course, a lot of things changed.
And some people said they picked up. Some people said they picked up more ghosts.
And 7 individual people said that they picked up more ghosts. In fact,
shit ain't regular, man.
Shit ain't regular, man. There were people who kind of stood by this independently of each other that they were picking up people. And to me, this is a really interesting ghost story. The reason it's an interesting ghost story to me personally is because a lot of things we were talking about in the last thing as it relates to like UFOs and abductions and stuff is like, oh, I had a friend of a friend who said one time they were out in a whatchamacallit and then blah, you know what I mean? Like it's like this very sort of distanced, nuanced, I don't really know. This is a girl who is doing a sociological experiment and asking cab drivers what, if anything, they noticed differently after a massive traumatic event happened in their city.
And getting multiple firsthand accounts.
And getting multiple firsthand accounts.
Basically the same situation.
Exactly. Independent of each other. That to me makes this...
They're also not independent of each other. I mean, these people work in the same field.
Sure.
These people might be trading stories.
Sure. But...
this could be one story that 7 people told also.
But what if it really happened?
I think the thing that is interesting when you compare it to the last conversation we had, and I don't know, well, I kind of think I understand why this is, but I think aliens, as they apply to this conversation, are sort of like more tangible, because we have this idea that, okay, we're beings who could come from a planet.
Yep.
There must be other beings that come from other planets.
Okay.
And if we could meet them, we could probably reach out and touch them. We could be in a room full of people who could all see them. You know, that it is necessarily a more tangible experience.
Doesn't necessarily require like a fundamental philosophical change of the way that we view the world.
And
Yeah.
I think this is the interesting thing with ghost stories, because there are no grays, for instance, in the ghost world. There's no standard ghost experience. A lot of them are, there's a lot of things of like somebody died in this apartment and they're still around or whatever.
You got the residual stuff. You've got the like apparitions. You've got the sort of like poltergeist type of,
And then you've got just generally like creepy shit happening that maybe is haunting or whatever. But there's vastly less consistency in ghost stories, which is interesting because it makes me think, for me, if I experience this, immediately my first sort of thought process would be, is this a thing that is happening in the world that I have observed? Or is this a thing that is happening to me that...
As in your mind?
Well, I guess sort of a mixture of in the physical world and in my mind. I always... Because I'm not a avid believer in ghosts and whatnot.
Okay.
But I often think when I'm sort of alone in the dark and I start to think about ghosts, I'm like, what if you start to see ghosts when you start to believe in seeing ghosts? What if they don't really become available to people who have their minds close to them?
So,
So I guess I would think instantly, like, is this a thing that I could even capture on a camera and show to other people?
Yeah.
Or did this person really just appear to me to have an effect on me?
Sure.
Two things I want to say about that. There is tying it back into our previous conversation from the first segment, there's a UFO researcher named John Keel who talks about how when you start looking at the phenomenon, meaning like the UFO phenomenon, it starts to look back. So he found sort of as he got deeper into researching this topic and talking to people who had experiences and just sort of like occupying more and more of his time in this way, that he started to experience things himself.
Do you think that's kind of like the thing where you learn a word and then you start to hear the word everywhere?
Or you buy a car and you start to see that car on the road more
like
often?
Once you entertain it as being a part of your reality.
But
it becomes...
That's the logical explanation, yes.
Sure.
But that's different though. To me, that's different though, because like, I know that when when I was in high school and my dad bought a green Ford Explorer that became the car that like I drove to like basketball practice and like to school and shit, I knew that there were other Ford Explorers on the road that I had seen in the past, but they were becoming
a possibility.
Yeah, I knew that green Ford Explorers were a possibility in my world. This version of this to me is like I feel you, but there's also a part of me that's like, it doesn't feel right to me to say because I started looking into the UFO phenomena that I started seeing more UFOs. Like I fucking wanted to see a UFO my whole life, and I've never seen one.
But there is a really interesting question here, because who knows how much of this is true, but I've heard many stories of people indigenous people in this country, when they first saw the Europeans coming over in their huge ships, that they couldn't see the ships for a very long time until a smaller boat came to shore and they realized that was a really big boat. There's all these accounts of people sort of looking. They knew that something was happening in the water, that they could see the displacement of the water and they could see that there was something against the backdrop of the horizon in the sky. But that piece of technology was so outside the realm of their experience that they literally couldn't even see it until it was sort of entered and logged into their brain as this is just a really big boat.
Well,
and there's a bunch of people on it.
Our brains naturally go to try and categorize or place things. And if that's not an available category, if ship is not an option in your brain,
then you don't see a ship.
Your brain is never going to see a ship on the horizon. It's going to try and categorize it as a weather phenomenon or mountain, or any number of things that you have maybe seen in a similar situation before.
Right. So I fuck with this take, but then my question would be, so I guess the continuation of that would be then, if the ships are ghosts, then you haven't been open to ghosts until you see a ghost until you see a ghost and then you see more ghosts.
Or until
it's not that the ships weren't real. It was that you hadn't seen it.
You couldn't perceive them.
Exactly. And now once you have had that experience, you may be more apt or likely to see more ghosts.
Or once you've had
hold on though. What is a ghost?
That's a good question.
Because a ghost is basically a name for a category of things that doesn't fit anywhere else.
I've read some
It's not an actual physical, tangible thing that we can say that for sure 100% is a ghost and that is not.
But there are some people
So your brain is still sort of stuck in this gray area of we've called this group of unknown things ghosts, but it's not an actual tangible thing in the way that a ship on the horizon is.
That's a good question, because I think there are people who, maybe tangible, since it implies like tactile association is the wrong word, but I think there are people who believe that there are empirical ways to discover whether or not there are spirits that are present, or whether or not,
And I think, it's not dissimilar for UFOs either. I know
and that's kind of why I wanted to group these things together. Is I feel like it's very similar in a lot of ways.
I do get that.
Conceptually, though, for some reason, my brain is more apt to entertain the possibility of flying crafts from other civilizations.
I honestly don't think that that's a very reasonable explanation of what UFOs are, though.
Sure.
Like, does it really make sense that craft from however many light years away would have reached Earth to either crash in the desert or like steal people from their beds at night to stick little bits of metal in them? Like, that's not a plausible scenario to me.
Well, who knows? Who has any idea what?
And why are like UFOs and the whole like alien thing, it's always like technology 10 years ahead of what we have.
Right.
If something was really coming here from another planet, hundreds or thousands or millions of light years away, we would never even know.
I just think conceptually the idea of another being traveling to this planet, regardless of how implausible their motives or methods are, is for some reason more believable to me than this sort of like shadow world that exists sort of on top of ours.
That's interesting, because I come at it from, I don't want to say the opposite, because I'm all about the UFO phenomena, and I'm all about like the potential existence of, like you're saying, like other beings. Mm-hmm. But for some reason to me, like, and I don't know why this is, I guess I don't have any, obviously none of us have anything empirical to back up what we're saying right now per se. But like, one of the things that I was reading recently that I think is really interesting is that the idea of ghosts has been looked at from like a couple different angles. And the more popular version of looking at ghosts is sort of like an undead being. Like it's a real being that is not dead. It has either sort of...
Or it is dead.
Or is dead. Excuse me. Yeah, is dead, but has sort of like missed the transition in some ways, and is an autonomous creature in a world that it doesn't belong in, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. One of the more interesting versions of this,
it's a disembodied spirit.
Yeah, exactly. One of the more interesting versions of this that I've read recently, which makes me actually kind of fly in the face of thinking that this is maybe a more realistic thing than that, is that I've seen and heard that there's been some research done about like energy as it relates to traumatic events, and the possibility that an event could be so tragic in a place or a situation that it could expend enough energy to sort of almost imprint a situation or imprint an experience into a location that doesn't actually involve
if you look at
beings.
If you look at the number of paranormal reports and UFO sightings, things like that, it does correlate directly with the amount of stress and anxiety that a particular culture is undergoing at that specific time.
100%. And a lot of what's going on here in a lot of the articles that they're talking about related to the tsunami is that the exposure to ghosts related to PTSD and traumatic events often goes up. But the question is, then in my mind, is that a society creating a mentality around a traumatic event, or is that the traumatic event itself imprinting on a place that other people then are independently and autonomously experiencing?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm fully thinking out loud right now, and
I want to know why
answers.
ghosts are taking taxis.
I think that's a really good transition to our third topic for a night.
That's cool, and we can do that. We can.
I think we should take a quick pause.
Sure.
And then jump into our last segment because
you're ready to do it and you got something good to turn into.
Exactly.
Perfect. We'll leave the ghosts in Japan, and we will allow you to wonder why ghosts are taking taxis. They're trying to go back, man. They're trying to find their stuff.
Tell us your ghost stories.
Tell us your ghost stories, 612-246-4614, or send us an email at hi@whatifpodcast.com.
And if you've been abducted by a UFO, you can hit me up personally.
Oh, and if you are a ghost,
at 651-442-2395.
If you are a ghost, make yourself known in this dark room right now where we have only a candle.
Turn off my salt lamp if you're a ghost.
The salt lamp is still on. No.
Give me a hell yeah!
Hell yeah!
Hell yeah! This is the What If podcast, and we'll be back with what if it really happens in a short second.
So a mother and a daughter are driving down a highway, and they're driving behind a big flatbed truck, and a dildo falls off the back of the truck and hits the windshield of the car that the mother and daughter are driving in.
Oh, God.
And the daughter says, "Wow, Mom, what was that? What was that thing that just hit the windshield?" And the mother, not wanting to explain what a dildo is to her young daughter, says, "It's just a bug, honey. It was a bug." She said, "A bug? It had a huge dick."
Whole program's cocked, boys.
Welcome back to the What If podcast. Tonight's entertainment's been brought to you by the lovely and talented Eric Mayson. Oh.
You ever notice how no one ever says that about men?
What?
That's a fucked up statement.
What?
Lovely and talented.
I just did.
I know.
I don't have a problem with that.
We're breaking new ground on the What If podcast.
I feel fucking lovely every day.
I don't like the way you ended that word. You said, "Dad."
Okay.
Maybe we should listen back, because you definitely just said, "I feel lovely every day."
Maybe I do.
Cool. I'm going to talk about time slips.
Will you explain time slips?
So we're okay. Really quickly, just to recap, we're talking about what if it really happened. We've talked about UFOs. We've talked about ghosts now, and Spencer is going to educate us on time slips, glitches in the Matrix, sort of.
No, that's not a good way of putting it.
Fuck. Well, that's how I understand it right now. So
just because the only sci-fi you're familiar with is the Matrix.
Correct me.
August 1901.
Yeah.
We've got two English women who are visiting these gardens in Versailles, France. Okay. Their names were Anne and Eleanor, and they were on vacation in France and decided to spend a day at Versailles. So they toured the palace at Versailles and then decided that they were going to explore the grounds in search of these gardens. So they go out and they're searching for these gardens and they get lost. They're wandering around. They pass an old farmhouse. They notice a plow lying by the side of the road, and they begin to have this like weird feeling, sort of like a real heavy, somber mood kind of like hanging over the two of them. And they come across these two men dressed in, quote, long grayish green coats with small 3-cornered hats.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
Do we know like where, so this was 1901, this was 115 years ago.
Correct.
Do we know like where this recount is coming from, or this like retelling of this story? Do we know like how or where what you're saying was documented?
So this story has been told and documented in many, many places over the last 115 years.
Okay.
I'm currently reading it from the very credible website, hoaxes.org.
Tight.
Hoaxes.gov.
So now,
Madeupshit.biz.
So we know it's
Jesus.
So we know it's real.
Jesus. Yes, I don't know. We're telling stories and we're
let's
taking
have-
them
no,
at
that's
face value.
totally fine.
Let's have the story.
I'm all
I'm
about
not
the
trying
story.
to cite my sources
No,
today.
I don't need that. It's all good. We'll put it in the show notes when we actually figure out like where it started,
Hoaxes.org/Versailles.
where the original telling came from, outside of hoaxes.org. All right, carry on.
So they're looking for these gardens and they get lost. And they come across a few weird things. These men dressed in these long, like gray coats, greenish gray coats that wouldn't have been around at the time.
Like they were in the past or in the future?
Like in the past.
Gotcha.
So they seem dated even at the time in 1901.
Gotcha.
But they stopped and asked these guys which way they were supposed to go to get to the gardens because they were lost. So the guys told them which way to go, and they go down this path for a while. They come across a gazebo, and they still they keep feeling more and more weird, more and more sort of like almost depressed as they're going further down this path. And they come across this guy who's like really gross looking. His face is all scarred, and he just kind of like is sitting and staring at them. They feel like that's probably kind of a weird thing to come across.
I would feel weird about that.
And
if
at
I
this
came
point,
across that.
At this point where they stop to look at this guy who's staring at them, somebody comes up and tells them, "Hey, you're going the wrong way. The gardens are actually this way." And this person points them in the other direction of where they're going. They cross a bridge and they arrive at what they assume to be the gardens. And they come across this woman who's sitting on a stool sketching the gardens in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else comes up to them and tells them that the entrance to this garden is actually on. So they're standing in front of this building. Someone comes out of the building and tells them, "Hey, if you're looking for the garden, it's actually around on this other side of the building."
Man, this is a fucking hard to find garden.
Right?
Is it really small? Is there like 6 flowers in this garden?
There's a good reason for it. Okay.
Right.
Just stay with me.
I'm just going to roast it a little bit. I'm here.
So they eventually, they listen to this guy. They go around to the side of the house and they eventually find this garden that they're looking for.
Sure.
So it takes all these extra steps. They run into all these people that seem really extra concerned with helping them find this
That
garden.
was like a Wizard of Oz type of
Yeah, right? So that's kind of the end of the story for that day. They find the garden, they hang out there, they end their day. A couple months later, these women are back in England, and this day comes up in conversation. They're talking about, remember when we were in Versailles and we went to find the garden and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that they have fairly different recollections of what happened on that day.
The two of them have
These
different
two women
recollections?
that were on this trip together remember that day like very differently.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, one of them mentions the woman that they saw sitting and sketching the gardens. The other one doesn't remember ever seeing that person.
Okay.
So they decide to write down independently of each other, like, okay, here's what I did on this day. Here's what I did on this day. And then compare the two.
As a result of like, what the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about?
Right. So they both had very different like stories when they had this conversation of
Okay.
like, I saw this person. I don't know what you're talking about. We crossed this bridge. No, we never crossed a bridge. That sort of thing.
Okay. All right.
So it turns out that there were several people that one of the women had seen and the other one did not. They also discovered that the day that they had visited the palace was the gardens was the anniversary of the sacking of, butcher some French.
It's okay. I butchered a bunch of Japanese like 20 minutes ago.
Tuileries in 1792.
Okay.
When Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette had witnessed the massacre of their Swiss guards and been imprisoned in the hall of the assembly.
Cool.
What was the significance? That was the anniversary of that or something?
Yes. So it was the same day, like 200 years later.
When they visited or when they were recounting this?
When they had been there, when they had visited. So they start to wonder if maybe they had seen some sort of residual effect of this day in 1792. And they compared their notes of what each of them had seen that day and tried to sort of parse out if these things really would have been happening in 1901 when they were there.
Yeah.
Or if these maybe were a time slip, so to speak, things that had come through from 1792, this day that had a lot of energy. People were massacred. There was like a very intense sort of residual effect from this day. So they had seen a plow outside of this farmhouse. And when they checked into it, learned that no plows had been kept in the gardens in 1901. However, there had been a plow on display outside the gardens in the 1700s. They had crossed a small bridge to get to the gardens. So this person came out and said, hey, you want to go this way? It's across this bridge right over here.
Bridges didn't exist in the time they were there.
They went back and they could not find the bridge. The bridge did not exist. Again, that bridge existed in the 1700s.
But one of them didn't remember the bridge, right?
Both of them remembered the bridge. Where their stories deviated the most was in terms of who they saw that day. So like the woman sketching or the guy in the green coat.
Gotcha.
They had different recollections of who they'd encountered on the way there, but they both remember taking the same path and having sort of the same experiences on the way there. One of them saw two men in green coats. These men, they later learned, were wearing the uniform of Marie Antoinette's Swiss Guard.
Okay.
They saw someone rush out of a building and slam the door shut behind himself. However,
People didn't slam doors in 1901.
Couldn't have been.
They only slammed doors in the 18th century.
However, this door was actually barred and bolted shut.
Oh, come on.
We're going to entertain the ghosts getting
I'm
into
with
cab
you.
stories, but we're going to talk shit about my time slip
I
story.
talk shit about both. This story is kind of a clusterfuck. I'm just trying to.
No, for sure. Hoaxes.org, not really on top of their shit. The last point is really gonna drive that home.
Okay. Let's do it.
Finally, the sketching lady herself could have been no one else but Marie Antoinette.
Perfect. Look just like her. This
story kind of out there.
Yes.
It's mainly
maybe not documented in the best ways.
It's mainly just kind of rambly.
Sure,
but I get
so
that it's freaky.
The basic idea, and there are many stories of time slips, some documented better or worse than this one.
Sure.
Of coming across a place, but experiencing it at a different time. So it's 2016. But we're walking down the street and suddenly we see downtown Minneapolis as it was in 1905.
Sure. Or you see like somebody like pulling a wagon by a horse.
Right. We
like
turn
in a contemporary situation.
We turn a corner and it's all horses and carts and et cetera.
Yeah.
So going back to the previous segment, is that some sort of residual energy, in this case from a really traumatic day where a bunch of people were killed?
Right.
Is it some sort of parallel dimension type shit where maybe these two timelines are just bumping up against each other for a moment and you're kind of experiencing both in that moment?
Yeah.
If you experience something like this, what do you do?
Oh, man. See,
if you walk out of my house in an hour and Lake Street looks like the 1700s,
I think
don't step on anything.
Yeah.
Because even the slightest alteration to the past can alter the future in ways you can't possibly imagine.
Oh, wow. That's a great old man voice. Great job.
Mason's one spot on impression is himself in 50 years.
What's Homer's dad's name?
Oh,
Grandpa?
That's
I think it's Grandpa Simpson.
That's what
Grandpa
Grandpa told Abe. That's what Abe Simpson told Homer Simpson at his wedding day.
Don't step on anything.
Yeah, that was the time travel episode of The Simpsons.
I feel like
because he keeps going back in time and accidentally stepping on bugs and dinosaurs and altering the future in ways you can't imagine.
I actually do remember this episode.
But I do think I think the question is what would you do? Is it what would you do when you get back to now? Or what would you do in the past when you're in there?
I feel like it can be any way you entertain it. My interpretation of like understanding what a time slip is from the very minimal research I've done from this story is not that you are actually in that time to be able to make a change. Yeah, I get the impression that you're seeing sort of like the way that I kind of visualize it is almost like do you remember like projectors as a kid? Like when you were in class? Projectors.
No, go.
Right.
Tell me more about
No,
that.
no,
What is
the video projectors that were a little delayed?
Wait. No, I'm thinking about the ones where it's like you have a transparency
familiar.
on a thing that goes.
Oh,
Okay, yeah.
Is that called a projector?
It's
What was
called
it called?
an overhead projector.
An overhead projector. Do you remember overhead projectors?
No.
So, I think of it as
Oh
almost
my
you have a layer of an image that is on the overhead projector, and then there's like another one on top of it, but it's not necessarily correct. You could peel that back and be like, no, this is the base layer, but this is like a top layer that you're seeing,
Because the word,
or some
the
inverted
word
version of
time slip in me invokes this idea, and I like the way it's phrased, time slip. It makes me think that there's almost these like fractures that you can sort of accidentally step. I'm thinking about this because I literally just watched an episode of Star Trek Voyager last night.
Tight.
Where they come across a planet that's been completely annihilated by some sort of apocalyptic explosion because they were using this dangerous form of energy, like nuclear energy, to power their planet.
Yep.
And it became unstable somehow, and
Sounds like
it
Earth.
vaporized their entire planet.
Sounds
right?
like Earth.
So they visit this planet to try to figure out what happened because there's evidence that there was an enormous civilization there. But while they're there, they accidentally slip through a tear in subspace that was created by the shockwave of this explosion. But instead of the shockwave of because something specific about the properties of this chemical that they were using, instead of the shockwave going out into space, it actually goes backwards into time. So the shockwave from this blast tore a hole in subspace that they accidentally walked through and found themselves 24 hours in the past when the civilization was still thriving.
Oh, cool.
So they knew they had one day to try to stop this explosion.
Oh, wow.
But then found out while they were trying to stop it that they were actually the ones that created it.
Oh.
Which is fascinating.
There's a somewhat,
I like
somewhat
the,
similar episode of The Next Generation.
Yeah, it's called Tomorrow's Enterprise. Right?
Whoa.
Well, there's that one, but there's also The Light Within.
Yes, that episode is amazing. Where Picard has a family and grows old and dies.
Yeah,
right?
so there's a probe
Look
that
at these nerds.
Oh, it's
just
so
fuck you, man.
good.
Go watch The Light Within tonight.
Going in.
so good.
Just going in.
No, but there's this probe that they come across that like latches on to Picard somehow.
Is it
And on the yes, it latches onto his anus, just way up in there.
unsurprising?
And
I'm not surprised.
he experiences this whole lifetime
Yeah.
on this other planet. So he wakes up and his
sort of while this planet is dying, or while the star is dying.
So he wakes up and he's in his home with his wife, and he lives this whole lifetime on this planet.
He has kids that grow up, and he falls in love. He grows old. He watches his whole planet die.
And he figures
He
out
learns
that
how to play the flute.
best part of the episode. He figures out that the planet is dying and that their civilization is going to be wiped out within a matter of years. And at the very end, when he figures this out, he's actually told by his family and his friends and everyone on this planet that this is a program that's running on this probe that they created to try and help their civilization carry on and be remembered in some way. So it was this probe flying through space, just waiting to encounter someone that they could imprint their civilization and their culture and their people on, so that they wouldn't be forgotten, because their planet and their star and everything is long gone.
Yeah, like thousands of years gone. The thing, okay, I'm going to tie it into this conversation. Sidebar though, that episode's amazing because before that shit, because nothing happens in that episode. He literally passes out, has a vision, and wakes up.
We've gone down a Star Trek K-hole.
Hold on.
In the episode, he lives 20 seconds in his real life, but it's an entire lifetime.
And prior to this vision, Picard's like not a family guy. He hates kids. He's like very stern, like career commander. And when he comes out of this 20-second vision,
he comes back.
He's like, it's like, anyway, essence of like amazing sci-fi there. But the reason that it's interesting, and you can cut most of that shit out probably.
Nope, absolutely not.
But
the
reason that it's interesting in context of this conversation is there we have two, albeit from Star Trek, two examples of what this could be. We have the one where you're basically having a vision that is sort of imprinted
a layer
somehow, whether it's by a probe or by residual effects of trauma.
Yes.
Or by who knows, some sort of environmental imprint that you experience. Although the story of the two women in Versailles is different because they were interacting with people, it seemed like.
And so I think that's actually that's uncommon from most of the
people are just
most of the time slip stories I've read. It's people will try and interact with their surroundings and
they can't.
They're not allowed to, basically.
Because then that's the other sort of like stereotypical time travel paradox of the other version of that Star Trek story is going back in time, and being able to affect things and maybe even realizing that that you maybe caused this thing that you're experiencing.
I feel like,
Ryan, what are your thoughts on Star Trek?
I'm admittedly not here for it. I mean, I don't dislike Star Trek. I just don't have that experience to inform my conversation. I guess I see what you guys are getting at in terms of versions of time slips or how time works. And as we look at it, I think if I'm going to go to like this actual story of these women of Versailles, my brain says to me that this is illogical. However, it's hard to communicate something that has been there that has not. So the difference, to call back to our previous segment with the ghost stuff, people have been known to have PTSD and project something into existence that is not there because of a traumatic event, and that can feel real to them and carry on. Mm-hmm. But it is isolated in the fact that it is their personal experience with that situation. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily tied to anything in time or space as much as it is, I just had an interaction that I can't explain. Mm-hmm. That is interesting to me. And again, I'm trying to look at this through the lens of what if it really happened. Is what's interesting to me about this is that if in this situation or any other of the versions that we've talked about, there are elements that fade through from something that has previously existed that you could not know about outside of your existence, that's what's interesting to me.
In some ways, this is like almost the most plausible of the three things we've talked about, in that like there is a scenario. Granted, no one has experienced that scenario that we can document.
At least
but
not
like,
on the macro level, yeah.
According to our understanding of physics, there is a situation in which that type of thing could happen.
Yeah. I guess I
mean, it's happening to you every time you look up at the night sky.
Right.
You are in a time slip.
The stars you see are different from
thousands and thousands of years into the past.
Yeah. I guess for me, like
every time you look in a mirror, it's a time slip.
Whoa. To the millisecond, it is a time slip. You
are looking at a younger version of yourself.
I guess for me, like the what if it really happened here for me is like time is a trip. And I actually know that we have on the docket, like we're gonna do more about time travel as a whole. But for me, like what if it really happened, like time travel, I guess, like to go back to what we were talking about in the second one, when like Mason, when you were like, this is more digestible to me, that like aliens are a real thing, over the fact that like there are undead or dead but not past creatures kind
that
of
are
thing.
Somehow hailing taxis.
Yeah, hailing taxis. Yeah. Like that, to me, both seem sort of equally hard to digest or equally like implausible. For me, like overlapping universes of space and time, that to me feels beyond the other two. That to me is actually less less like probable. Not from I understand what you're talking about when you say like, oh, like we look at a star and a star has been dead for a while, but because it's light years away, it still looks like it's burning to us because we're waiting for that light to come to us. I understand that that's like in its own right a time slip, but for me, like the idea of there being overlapping time periods on top of each other that we can somehow inadvertently like fall into and witness for short moments in time and then like like suck back out of and be back in our normal world, that to me feels like far less plausible. But because it might just be
because we don't have an accurate understanding of what it means to live in time.
Well,
You know?
and that's actually what I was.
Think of it like if we, you know, if what we understand to be the truth, which is that time is static and that we move through it.
Yes.
You know, that if we could really have an outward eye and a sort of bird's eye view understanding of the concept of the timeline that we live in, that we would be able to see it as a bubble that is sort of always there. That we could, if we looked at the life of a tree, we could see it all in one frame. That it would be, we could see baby tree, big tree, dead tree.
Right.
That we wouldn't be seeing it as this like moving animated thing, but it was this like image of all of it. Right. And that if what's surrounding the forces of our understanding of the progression of time and entropy and moving in this sort of like following an arrow forward, if we could understand that maybe once in a while, and I'm totally bullshitting right now.
Yeah,
but that, you know, if there's electromagnetic waves and there's gravitational waves and there's, you know, things that like I've been told that there are hundreds of like microscopic singularities in our atmosphere that by the reaction of X-rays and solar waves hitting our ionosphere, that it actually does create these little microscopic singularities that are there for a moment and then dissipate because they get crushed under the weight of their own gravity and they don't ever get allowed to. Anyway, you know, that there are all these unseen forces that are sort of like less static and are more dynamic that we don't understand at all. That could, you know, every once in a while give us an image of something that is not an apparition. It is very real. You know, we know for a fact that the 1700s happened. Right. That they were here at some point.
Do we though?
You know, and if we understand time to mean that if they were there, then they are still there somehow. Yeah. That it is at least like plausible that we could tap into some sort of like tidal function of observation that we could somehow grasp it for a moment or observe it for a moment. If it is, you know, if it is still there somehow. But who knows?
This has been the What If podcast. And I think that is 1,000% one of the best ways we could even remotely possibly go out.
I think that's how we do that.
That is how we do that. What if it really happens? What if UFOs are real? What if ghosts are real? What if you could slip time? It's been a pleasure, Mr. Eric Mayson, as it always is.
Thanks for having me.
It's been fun. Thanks for being with us one more time. If you have an experience related to any of these things, we 1,000% want to hear it. Send us an email at hi@whatifpodcast.com or call us and leave us a voicemail at 612-246-4614. And until then, keep wondering what if. We'll see you next time.
Love you guys.
Love you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the What If podcast. For show notes, transcripts, and links from today's episodes, visit whatifpodcast.com.